Hello friends, welcome back to the Tiny House Concierge. My name is Alaska, I am your Tiny House Concierge, and today we're going to talk about why you find so much conflicting information when you try to research tiny houses. If you have ever tried to do that, chances are you have gotten like a billion answers that have somehow led you nowhere, and you hear one thing from one person, another thing from another person, and at the end of the day, you're like, I'm confused. How do you go tiny? There's a reason for that. There's a reason you were so confused, and there's actually several reasons, and we're going to go over them in this video. So, real quick, this is a new channel. If you would be so kind as to hit subscribe, that would be amazing. Also, hitting the thumbs up button helps a lot. All right, good talk. So, why is it so confusing? Why do you find so much conflicting information when you try to research tiny houses? The first and main reason is that we are still in a pioneering stage. I know you've seen a lot of tiny houses on Instagram, Pinterest. I know it feels like they've been around forever, but friends, change takes time. Updating laws takes time. Getting on the same page takes time. So even though you see a lot of people maybe going tiny, all of those people are part of a pioneering movement. And if you are thinking about going tiny right now, or you are going tiny right now, you are part of the pioneering movement. And I think that's something that most people don't understand when they start going tiny. They assume that the laws, the regulations, the protocols, like the standards are all figured out already, and that all they need to do is plug themselves in. And that's not how it is at all. Like, we are all working together to write the book on going tiny right now in real time. So if you are in the process of going tiny, please, please, please put yourself like in the position of being a pioneer, and recognize your role and understand that that's going to take some further responsibility on your part. You have to do more due diligence. You have to maybe be the first to approach your city planning department. You're going to have to convince people of things and why they should let you live in a tiny house. And there's some work there to be done, and there's some responsibility there to be taken. But if you are willing to take that on, that will empower you with the tools that you need to actually be a tiny houser. Okay, so you are in a pioneering movement, and we're still working to figure it out. That's part of the reason it is so confusing. All right, another reason that things are so confusing is that we're still working to get on the same page about what a tiny house is. Now, I know I said in one of my last videos that a tiny house is a house that's 400 square feet or less, and a secondary definition being that it's built out of traditional housing materials. Yes, and that still doesn't address the trailer versus foundation issue. And there's some little things like that we're still tweaking the definition of what a tiny house is. And so that's part of the reason for some of the confusion there. Additionally, I want to differentiate between a legal defined tiny house and the tiny house lifestyle or the tiny house movement. We see a lot of people that are like building, maybe 600 square foot container homes or AUD units, or people who are living in RVs or vans, and that are referring to those structures as my tiny house. Now, I'm a huge fan of the inclusivity. I'm a big supporter of let's all play. Like, the tiny house lifestyle, tiny house movement, I think has so many valuable things to offer. My personal opinion is that as many people as we can get on board as possible, do it. Come play. You can totally sit with us. That is how I feel. And I know it's important that we also maintain a legal, actual definition of what a tiny house is, because that piece is going to help us change things legally. And that's a really important component to getting this movement pushed forward. So, but, defining a tiny house, that's part of the reason for the confusion. We're still tweaking that one. All right. Another reason you hear so much conflicting information about tiny houses is that things are being handled differently in different places. So you might get on a Facebook forum and ask about, parking a tiny house in Kansas, and somebody who lives in a tiny house in Kansas might very well answer you. However, if they live in a different county or a different city or have a different tiny house in mind, they might get a whole different set of instructions of what it would take to legally park a tiny house. And so it's being handled differently in different places. I don't know how else to say it. So unless you're talking to someone who did what you want to do, exactly what you want to do, same kind of house, same city, talk to the same planning department person in the same span of time, you're just going to hear something different. And I've actually even called city planning departments, gotten a different person in the same week, and gotten a different set of instructions. So friends, remember the pioneering thing. We are all working together to get on the same page and make this happen, but it's a work in progress. So that can be part of the reason for the confusion. I do recommend that you do a lot of due diligence, but I also recommend that if you just decide to pull the trigger, just go for it. Get everything in writing. Make sure that your planning department's on board with whatever to get legal parking. It's a lot of work. We'll make more videos. Don't worry. You don't have to do this alone. We're gonna talk this out together. So, but part of the reason for the confusion, being handled differently in different places. All right, another reason is that we're constantly updating as we go along. So as we move through the tiny house movement, we learn different things along the way. We learn what works, we learn what doesn't, we learn what we're seeing success with over here, and then we change things depending on the new information that we're uncovering. So what you heard a year ago might not be what you heard now, but that information from a year ago is still on the internet. So that's part of the reason for the confusion too. Okay, another reason that we're hearing conflicting information is that a lot of times when we start researching tiny houses, we're looking at the original tiny houses. And by original tiny houses, I mean original tiny houses of the modern tiny house movement in the United States of America. Okay, now those were maybe built 15 years ago? So more? I gotta Google that. Hold on. But the point is that what they were dealing with then and what we are dealing with now are different. The tiny house movement has exploded in a fairly short span of time, so the information still kind of feels current, but it's also a whole nother ballgame. Given that there's limited information about tiny houses out there, we usually run into the whole span of information, and that can be confusing. Okay, so the last reason that you might be confused when you try to research tiny houses and why you find so much conflicting information, friends, some people don't know what they're talking about. The internet is a fabulous place for people to gather, some of whom know nothing and love to talk really, really loudly. And I don't do about that. That's life. That's the internet for you. Sometimes people will just Google one or two things about the tiny house industry or the tiny house movement. They will get an idea in their head and then they will just vomit it onto people on the internet. And that can make it really hard or discouraging to know, where did this person get their information or why they seem to really know, but they don't really know. They're just really passionate and really loud. So it's important to spend enough time marinating in the movement to really get a feel for who's giving you good information and who's maybe not giving you such great information. So those are some of the reasons that you might be confused when you try to research tiny houses. Please don't be discouraged. Please put yourself in the position of being a pioneer and put yourself in that mindset. I promise you the movement is going forward. And if you're a part of that or you want to be a part of that, that's amazing and welcome. And I hope to meet you in the very near future. I want you to know that if you want help going tiny, if you want to talk out the specifics of your situation, I am a licensed realtor and I also am a tiny house consultant. So I will sit online with you. We'll get on Zoom, one-on-one, lay out the pieces of your life, answer your questions, address your concerns, make a plan for what makes sense in your situation for how to move forward. All right, let's keep this short. My name is Alaska. This is the Tiny House Concierge. I'll see you in the next video.